Welcome to Sacred Magic. Violet is on a quest to bring sacredness back into our everyday experiences. Anyone can have an extraordinary life when they are able to tap into their sacred magic within. Violet and her guests will be sharing their divine passions, inspirations, and stories of connecting with their sacred magic. We are so happy you have joined us today. Let's get started with your host, the magical creator of Discover Your Spiritual Gifts, Vialet Rayne.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sacred Magic Podcast. I'm your host, Vialet Rayne. If you've ever been on these and you watch the video and you see the video do this, it's my hyperactivity, just so you know, because I'll get excited and the tension will build in my legs. And so recently I've noticed that I have to pay attention that I'm not bouncing the video. So if I do that, that's me doing that. So I'm sorry. Today, my host is Melissa Perry. She is mom astrologer. She's an intuitive astrologer committed to improving parent-child relationships with astrology. Melissa has been studying and applying astrology to her life for almost 15 years and has a knack of making astrology practical and easy to understand. Melissa uses gentle, responsive, conscious parenting to inform readings, ensuring mom, dad, and child are all nurtured, heard, and understood. What an interesting way to use astrology and to make it practical. Not many know how to do that and useful. So, Melissa, how did you get to what you do today? What led you down a path to choose to work with moms or parents and use astrology as a tool?
Absolutely. Something that has been really close to my heart is my relationship with my mother, my relationship with my caregivers, and my relationship with myself resulting. I grew up in a challenging situation where I felt like I wasn't heard or understood. As an expressive person, that was just something that was really damaging, I think, to the way that I progressed in life up until I found a tool such as astrology. Astrology has helped me to understand myself better when I didn't have that reflective mirror. Sometimes our parents can get so bogged down with everyday mundane housework, work, their family life. It's not always easy, and especially if they've had childhood trauma themselves, for them to mirror us in a way that's healthy. So what I try to do, and what I've done with myself, is validated myself endlessly through astrology, constantly, consistently till this day. It's been a really beautiful journey of self-discovery for me, where I feel like there wasn't a lot of availability by my caregivers to give that to me. And my goal in this personal growth is to help other people, especially other moms, understand their children before they can speak, before their children know what they need themselves, and so that just the family can thrive, because we really need thriving families for happy childhoods.
I love that, because I truly believe that most of the time when we come into this lifetime, we're this divine soul essence, and through all the experiences, we kind of get out of shape. We get kind of wounded. We kind of lose that divinity. And as a parent, I agree with you. There's so much going on that we don't always see that divine child. And we don't always understand that what we say and our actions, how that child takes it, and how that can create really deep wounds or prevent them from stepping into who they are. And it's not that we're bad parents. I just think we're just so hustle bustle busy that, those comments that we make to the side, we don't realize. And even as adults, we say things to people that our intention was this, but it was received over here in a totally different way. And we don't always know that or see that or are aware of that, being aware. Now, for me, astrology seems to be very complicated. So I don't know how you can make it practical, but astrology to me seems very complicated. It's not something that I've ever really leaned into heavily because it seems to be so vast. So how do you make astrology practical? What what type of astrology are you doing? Because I also know there are multiple types, right? And everybody has their own style, right, of astrology. So share a little bit about your approach and the tools that you're utilizing.
Sure. So I think something that a lot of healers run into is this over focus on the modality, whether that's Reiki, whether that's astrology, whether that's whatever healing modality it is. And astrology is its own modality. It has its own set of jargon. It has its own, like you said, different types of astrology. And for someone who's just approaching astrology as someone who's new, who wants it to see what it does and how it helps, that can be really overwhelming. How I approach astrology is bringing my own life experiences into the mix. I did actually just attend an OPA retreat, the Organization for Professional Astrologers. It was really valuable because it really showed me that everyone does things differently and there is no right way. There's no hard and fast right way. This is how you do it. That's what's really beautiful to me about astrology, is that I can bring my own personal life experiences. So my experience with my childhood, I started reading what we would now consider gentle conscious parenting back before it was called that, because I knew if I could understand what I needed and I could do the own research as a teenager, then maybe I wouldn't have the same pitfalls with my children when they were teenagers. Maybe I could communicate to my caregivers that, hey, this is what I need. Can you help me with this? Can we approach this from a different situation? It comes from my background as going to nursing school. So I have a lot of the metaphysical, and also like the body, like where are we feeling this in our body? It comes back to psychology. It comes back to not being a therapist, but dipping my toe in that realm. So the way that I deliver astrology is very palatable and understandable because I'm not coming at you with Jupiter is in retrograde and this is what it means in your chart. I'm going to tell you, hey, your growth process is very internal. And these are the practical steps that we're going to take so that you don't feel like you're meeting the world in the wrong way because the world wants you to meet you here and you're over here. So it's very much, and for any burgeoning astrologers or healers that are listening right now, you're always going to be bringing your own life experiences into the mix. And that's what makes you the beautiful healer and meant to touch the people that you're meant to touch, you, right? And then your modality is over here.
I love that. I love that because I believe that the people that are doing this type of work, whether it's healers, astrologers, psychic, mediums, readers, coaches, mentors, massage therapists, healing touch, whatever that is, we come from our own experiences, and most of us have experienced trauma and wounds. We've had life experiences that have been really tough, and we've been able to move through it, which means we attract people, clients, people that we work with that have had similar experiences. And not that we go in and say, I've been there, done that, right? I know exactly what you're going through, because that doesn't help the client, doesn't help the person at all. But knowing, I know what they're feeling. I have some idea of what this felt like. I have some idea of what this experience would be like. And when I was there, I wished someone would have said this to me, or someone would have done this, or someone would have given me this perspective. Because sometimes when we're in the storm, we don't hear what people are saying to us or giving unless it's meant for us to hear it. I mean, how many times have you had an experience happen and a friend of you just kind of blew it off or said, why are you making this such a big deal? Shouldn't be. And how that hurt because you wanted to be heard. You just wanted somebody to listen. And there's a difference between being wounded and hurt and needing somebody to listen and telling the same story for 15 years. Because the person that's still telling the same story for 15 years, there's something inside of them that likes being in that victim, and there's nothing you can say or do that's going to pull them out of that, because that's where they're stuck at until they want to get out of that story, right? There's a difference. But the person that's freshly wounded and hurt and just wants to be heard, the person that's experienced that understands that, right? And can help them. And I think that's where we're guided, is where we're passionate about and how to help people. And I love the fact that you've identified moms and parents are really what you want to work in. That's really kind of your niche, is to kind of help them through that. So share with us a little bit from a parent's perspective. How can the chart help them with their children? And how early can they really go and have a reading? Is it when we have a baby? Is it when we're a toddler? Is it throughout the whole life? And does that chart shift from year to year? And would it be helpful to check in periodically?
Absolutely. I love that question, because I think people really feel like your chart, in modern, or like in mainstream astrology, that your chart is fixed and you're a victim of the stars, and no matter what you do, this is your life and this is what you're set with. What's really interesting about astrology is that it is on a cycle. Every planet has its cycle. It goes through different ways of expressing itself. It goes through different phases and seasons. It goes through different aspects with other planets where those energies are interacting with each other. So when we talk about checking in, while we don't want to let it run our life, you can check in. If you're feeling a certain way, it's always great to look at those energies that are interacting. As far as being a mom with astrology, it's really interesting, the things that I've learned as an astrologer and that I try to impress upon my clients. It's that as parents, we are imperfect, and we know that. And even if we know that, when we go into parenthood, we're expecting to be this perfect parent. I'm going to not ever mess up. I'm going to know exactly what my child needs because that child was inside me, right? It's from me. But the reality of it is, when it comes out, it's a totally different story. The first time you mess up, it's traumatic. It's terrible. You're like, I can't believe I did this. This is not who I am. The mother goes through that change also. So when a baby is born, the mother is born as well. And she uses a different set of tools and different parts of her brain to access this new life of that she's created. When we're in the throes of everything, like you said, we're in the throes of things. Sometimes we can't hear those messages. We can't hear the messages that we're getting from the spirit world if we're a spiritually in tune mom. And that can be really destabilizing. So I try to help moms really see, this is the cycle at play. You're going to traumatize your child a little bit. This is exactly how you're going to traumatize your child. This is what you can do to lessen that blow. Okay. It really is motherhood through the lens of spirituality. As far as when you can check in, I recommend to not check in before the baby's born, because obviously we don't know the birth time and the birth date, but also because we don't want to unconsciously impress this idea of what our child's going to be like before we actually get to meet them, right? So I recommend checking in toddlerhood, definitely teenager level. So important. I find when I do sessions with moms and teenagers, there's this automatic, like, I get you. No, I get you. And there's a friendship formed. There's a friendship in the spiritual realm formed where, like, there was a lot of tension there. So there's so much. There's so much that astrology can do. And it really is a lifelong journey. You'll see the different phases that you go through. I can look at two charts together and how you guys might interact. There's literally so much. There's so much. So what I kind of try to tell people is, if you are having any kind of issue, we can always look at that. No matter what it is, it does not matter.
I love that, the communication. I do believe we influence before birth. And here's what I mean by that. You have as the mother and you're carrying that child, you have some influence on that child. And here's a couple of things that I've seen in my own experience. With the first child that I had, the thing I kept saying over and over again was I wanted unconditional love. Somebody that would love me no matter what throughout my life, because I hadn't had a lot of that within my lifetime. And so that was my prayer, was to have a child that would unconditionally love me and that I could unconditionally love back. I absolutely got that. Um, and she does love me unconditionally, but she's not mushy. She's not huggy. She's not that water energy that I am, right? And so when I carried my second child, I wanted somebody that I could hug and cuddle with and would be mushy and have that water energy and that emotion and that connection. And I absolutely got that. So we do influence as mothers energetically, spiritually, when we're carrying the child. Now, did I influence it, or was I spiritually getting downloads of what this relationship was going to be about? Was it the chicken or the egg? Which came first, right? So, was I intuitively getting downloads of what this relationship was going to be about before they were born? Or did I influence what the relationship was going to be about? You could argue both sides, right? You could have positive and negatives on both sides that state that, but we definitely influence. So I would say, when you're carrying a child, what are you listening to? What are you into? What are you passionate about? All that has an influence, and they have tested that even what you crave is what that child loves to eat here, and those different things come through from parent to child, right? Which is fascinating to me, because when you can go back and look at, I was really into this and I really loved to eat this and I really didn't like that. It's interesting to see how that all plays a part, right, in the influence of that. So I love that. And I love the fact of understanding that astrology is not a fixed thing, that as the planets move, as things shift, it also shifts your energy. And I know lots of people that do regular astrology checks, like they may do them once a year. What's this year going to be like? What planets are going to affect me throughout? Now, as Melissa said, doesn't mean you're stuck in that energy, but awareness allows you to understand what you might be facing and how you want to face it differently. Sometimes when we go through life and things were just moving through life without being very aware, you're always responding to things. But if you can be aware of it in the beginning, you might be able to influence how you react to it differently, how it comes in differently. That knowledge is power, right, of understanding. And so, as a parent, if you're having a difficult time with your child, you're having a hard time communicating, astrology reading may be very beneficial, because you may be communicating in a way that doesn't work for them. And just by changing your approach, you can really change the dynamics in the relationship. Um, and so I love that aspect, and even bringing dad along. What is dad's influence in the astrology charts? So what have you seen? We've talked a lot about moms, but what have you seen when you're able to work with both mom and dad in these relationships, and how does that impact the overall?
Absolutely. I love that question because I think a lot of parents can kind of become, in a way, enemies at the very beginning of childhood because of various different reasons. One wants to do something the other way. And there's a lot of butting heads. And I know from my own personal experience having kids, there's a period of time at the beginning where you just like do not like your husband. At all. And that heals. But when I get mom and dad in the hot seat together, and we're really looking at their child's chart and how each of their own charts themes have influenced their child, like you talked about influence, there's aspects that run in families. There are signs and placements and all of that that run in families, themes that run in families, and that's no surprise to us in the regular world. That is reflected in the chart. So when we can see like, hey, you're bringing this to the table and this is causing a behavioral issue, and hey, you're bringing this to the table and this is also not helping, but also like this is what we can do to help. It's always about problem solving. And coming back to that problem solving and looking at, each sign and planet has a evolved, way of doing things and an unevolved way of doing things. So if we can just use that, if we can use that energy of that de-evolution and pop it into an evolutionary way of behaving, mom and dad can come center and recenter the child and recenter their own healing instead of just like all this confrontation and confusion. So I really find that when we do sessions with anyone, but especially mom and dad, we're coming together in the middle at this like really clear understanding of what's going on. And that's what I love about astrology, is because it's always about problem solving. I don't like to leave anyone hanging. We're always looking at like, what's the solution, what we can do. And if we can get everyone on the same page without having to go through this like couples therapy process where we're having to like tell the therapist like, hey, this is what's happening. Hey, this is what's happening. When I can just look and be like, hey, I see what's going on here. Here's how we can fix it. It just makes the whole process so much faster and so much more streamlined and easier for everyone to digest.
I love that. One of the things you wanted to talk about today was the moon signs for children. So you're looking at the moon signs. Why the moon signs, and what can it provide us? What information does that help us with?
Absolutely. So if anyone's been around a toddler, they know that they can be highly emotional. They run on emotions. There's not a whole lot of logic or reasoning that goes on in the toddler brain. And that's structurally as well as astrologically. So up until the age of about 7, when we start to really get our high reasoning skills in our brain developed, we're completely emotional. And the moon is the sign of our emotions and our subconscious. It's also the planet of our mother. We're very attached to our mother up until that age. And then we kind of start to like go out and explore the world if we've had a safe attachment to her, right? So looking at that moon sign is going to tell mom how their child perceives them. For example, my daughter has a Libra moon. She's very, very concerned with friends. She's 3.5. She's very concerned about friendships and relationships. When things get disharmonious or messy in my home, we have behavioral issues. And that speaks so much to the sign of Libra. They need harmony. They need peace. They need things to be balanced. And so me knowing that she has that, when she starts to act out and I still start to feel like yelling, right? Or I start to feel like I'm coming unhinged in a way, I can consciously remember, because I know astrology and I've had her chart read and I've read her chart, that, hey, maybe I need to just like pick up around the house. Maybe I need to like lower the volume on the music. Maybe I need to take her outside. Maybe she needs to go be with her friends. It really is an excellent way to see how she needs to be taken care of emotionally. For example, my 1.5-year-old son has a Sagittarius moon. And when he gets unregulated, I know that he needs to go for a ride in the car, because Sagittarius is this long travel. They like to be out traveling, intellectual, learning. I know that. And that's something that they couldn't have told me with their words, because they can't express that. I feel like I hacked the system, and it's very hard for me to go out and not try to help other moms with that in just regular world. I'm like, hey, I think I know what's going on here. It's literally like, so it's worth millions of dollars in my brain to just have that information. So there's so much. There's so much that you can learn. And that's one planet. That's one planet. That's without looking at the aspects. That's without looking at its house. We can go so deep. It's incredible. It surprises me every time I sit down for a reading. I'm like, wow, I can't believe that we really dug that up and we were able to nurture that and take care of that. How incredible. And that's what keeps me doing this is that seeing the relief on a mom's face, seeing that light bulb go off, that click. Best feeling in the world. And I think it is for the parents also.
So I have an interesting question for you. So my grandchildren are in their 20s, right? Some of them are adults. Can looking at their charts, even as a parent or a grandparent, be helpful in how to support them to be able to move forward, to understand a little bit more about them, except for the fact that we understand our children? But I think the charts would have great insight deeper into how do we really support and help them in their lives?
Absolutely. Absolutely. 20s can be a tricky time for a lot of kids. And no matter how wonderful parents, grandparents we are, we're not always going to get it, right? We come from a different perspective. We come from a different life. We come from a different way of experiencing the tribulations. We come from a totally different time in history. There's certain transits that kids who are in their 20s go through that makes things extremely challenging for them. They feel like they have their life together. They feel like they know what they're doing, and then all of a sudden it falls apart. Looking at the chart will give you all the information that you need to help you guide them through that process. So valuable for any age. And there's a lot that goes on in your 20s that it can be very destabilizing. And I think from experiencing our own 20s and watching our grandchildren go through that, we know how tumultuous that can be. And how comforting would that be to have your parent or your grandparent care about you that much that they would go to that length to understand you? How comforting would it be to not have to tell your grandparent or your grandchild, or have your grandchild not have to tell you, I'm struggling in this way. Like, can you help me? How embarrassing some of the things that we go through. If you can just understand that without that's the most validating thing, is to have somebody just understand you like that. And astrology offers that. It does.
So I love that. So think about this. Those of you listening, I'm one generation. My children are another generation. My grandchildren are another generation. Now, as you were growing up and your grandparents would make comments like the world is going blah, 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 blah. We're not, because it was a whole different generation. And then you see that cycle over and over again. And I think just understanding not just the toddler, not just the child that's in elementary school, not just the teenager, but what about your adult children and grandchildren that are in their 20s, or they're really struggling and you don't know what to do? Because I feel like we have a whole generation of 20-year-olds, because it's not easy to go buy a house. It's not easy to have a career today. It's not, they have different challenges than we had, and we struggled ourselves, but they're struggling in a different way to really be able to say, let's look at this. How can I support and help? How can I motivate? Because I have friends, I have lots of people that have kids in their 20s that are struggling to create a life for themselves, or even really high teens at 18 through 20. How do we get them motivated? How do we get them to want to drive a car and learn how to drive? It's fascinating to me how many of these kids don't have licenses at 16, right? Our generation fought to have that freedom and
Yeah.
independence. And these are guys that are like, yeah, if you'll drive me, it'll be perfect, right? What is the differences? Because there's lots of differences. And being able to go buy a house or rent an apartment is not as easy as it was when I went through finding your career and your space. There are different challenges, but using astrology, how can I support and help them? What can I do to make this at least easier? How can I understand it a little bit more? Using an astrology to help you look at it, just think how powerful and beneficial it could be for the relationship and for that child and for you to have a different perspective. Because I imagine, and I don't know, I'm not an astrologer, I imagine a lot of the challenges we're having in the world today, a lot of the social issues, a lot of the things that we're dealing with are in those charts, and the planets are trying to help us move through some of this stuff that we are fighting with, wanting to keep the same. Because COVID, believe it or not, came in and said change is coming. And whether you like it or not, everything is being turned upside down and it is changing. I bet it was in the planets, the stars. There is indication of what that looks like. There's no going back to the way it was. We can only go forward. And they're pushing us to change our perspectives, to change how we live, change our relationships, change how we work, change how we save money, change. It's all being forced through change. And I bet it's in those charts.
It so is. That would be a whole other podcast.
That would be a whole other podcast. But just food for thought. Think about that. Just spend some time sitting in that energy and think how Melissa and other astrologers could help you kind of see it from a different perspective. And I think I love the fact that she's focused on parenting and moms, but there are lots of different styles, lots of different ways to do this. But if you're looking to have understanding about parenting, grandparenting, your children, all of that, maybe even healing the wounds of your childhood, it sounds like she has the tools to kind of help you find perspective and really have some practical ways to kind of move through some of those energies.
Thank you. Yeah.
Right? I love it.
Yeah.
I love, Melissa, that you took the time to be with us today. But talk to us a little bit about what you personally offer. If somebody wanted to reach out, find out more, or to contact you with a question, or just to connect or schedule something, share with us a little bit about some of the stuff that you offer.
Sure. So offerings are always evolving. Right now, I'm really, really focused on helping teenagers and moms and dads come to this central understanding of what themes that they're dealing with in their lives and create that closer bond. I'm also really shifting my focus into supporting mothers who feel really disconnected from their spiritual life, from when they were younger to now they're moms and they're like, I don't have the same relationship with God. Things don't seem like they're being communicated to me in the same way. I feel really ungrounded. I feel really confused. For those moms, I have an Ascension Motherhood Blueprint reading. And what that does is we look through your chart and we re-identify where you are right now, what childbirth and the child rearing process has changed in you, and how we can reconnect that piece of our brain that maybe went dormant when we were having those children. For the teenagers and moms, that's a check-in reading. Those are both available on my website, www.momstrologer.com. If you want to just hang out with me and get a kind of taste of how I communicate and what I'm about, I am on TikTok at the Momstrologer, also Instagram at the same handle. And I do events throughout the Denver and Wyoming region. Those post on my website. And hopefully by the time this podcast launches, and continuing on, I'm going to do a mastermind for moms who cannot seem to connect with other moms, who need that deeper spiritual love, that deeper spiritual conversation and community. Because with Pluto and Aquarius, which I think has been a huge theme and something that we've seen a lot on social media about other astrologers talking about, they're talking about this big social movement. As moms, we don't have time. We don't always have time to do the big social movement. So how does that relate to motherhood? Is building community, and building a community that's beyond like, this is how you manifest, this is how you do this. This is real in the grit motherhood stuff. So that's where you can find me is in those spaces.
I love that. I love that. Thank you for taking the time to chat with me today, to connect. I really did love it. Let's stay connected. Absolutely. Hopefully I'll see you at some of your events in Denver, because I know I'll be at Body, Mind, and Spirit. And that's where I met you the first time. So hopefully we'll see you there again. So yeah, thanks for taking the time today.
Thank you for having me, Violet. This was super fun.
I love that. I love that. And I hope you have a sacred and magical week. Please like, comment, and follow us on your favorite channels. Remember, by liking and commenting and sharing and all of that, it helps us grow awareness of this podcast so that other people can hear it and find it. So have a sacred and magical week. And thanks so much for listening.
Thank you for joining us. To find out more about Vialet, head over to discoveryourspiritualgifts.com. You can also send a personal message to Vialet through email, violet@discoveryourspiritualgifts.com. If you love the show, subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify. Until next time, remember, we are meant to have abundant and joyful lives. We hope to see you soon at Discover Your Spiritual Gifts.